What are some crimes that are almost too ridiculous to be true? Such as a scammer guaranteeing former Major League Baseball player Todd Hollandsworth a return of at least $12.5 million in less than a year on an investment of just $325,000. And Hollandsworth actually believing him. Or this psychic who was able to get over $4 million on just bad omens. Let's get right to it. Number 7. Over 3,000% ROI. Beloved former Dodger Todd Hollandsworth and his wife fell for what must have been one of the most obvious scams of the century. Apparently, Hollandsworth and his wife were sucked into believing they would get a 30 times return on an investment opportunity, which is basically a 30,000% return every month, and they expected it for 10 months. So, when Todd and his wife invested $325,000 with a personal friend, they expected to start getting $12.5 million in returns in 10 months. In their defense, they did actually have an investment contract that promised this in black and white. What Todd and his wife didn't know is that a contract can't legalize fraud. Todd and his wife say that there was some reason for suspicions right off the bat. For example, they had never heard of RPAD LLC, the company that they were handing their money off to. But they signed anyway because of the personal relationship they had with Lonnie Moss, the man who introduced them to the scam. So it wasn't the over 3,000% ROI that threw up the suspicions flags. It was the fact that they had never heard of the company they were handing their money to, which is just interesting. Anyway, as you would expect, the monthly returns didn't come, and Todd finally realized that something was off. So the couple accused Lonnie Moss of trying to scam them and operating RPAD LLC just to misappropriate their funds for his personal use. Naturally, that quickly became the subject of a lawsuit, and now the Hollandsworths are seeking $1 million in damages in the civil suit, which claims fraud, civil theft, and breach of contract. Moss, on the other hand, was arrested for first-degree grand theft and money laundering. Maybe if the Hollandsworths get their million in damages, this won't end up being a total loss for them. But I can't imagine why they seriously thought they would become over $12 million richer over a $325,000 investment. Number 6. The jealous pastor. Roger Allan Holmberg, a 75-year-old pastor, was crazy enough to put hands on his wife in public just because she got an upgrade to first class and he didn't, which is about as childish as you can get, right? The couple were aboard an Alaska Airlines Flight 275 from Seattle to Anchorage when Roger suddenly realized something was wrong. His wife was in the first class cabin and he was stuck at the back of the plane with all the other common folk. Roger clearly thought this was some cosmic injustice here, so he stormed into the first class cabin and asked his wife how she got upgraded. She explained to him that she got the upgrade because she was a Gold Point member and she had enough points to get the upgrade. The woman in question, who's 59 years old, had only been married to Roger for 18 months and only became his wife after his wife had passed away. Well, Roger apparently didn't think his wife should be in first class without him and didn't like her attitude when she explained everything. So he yelled at her and flipped her off. There was an off-duty policeman on the plane who witnessed the whole thing and asked Roger to take things easy. But that didn't calm Roger as he got physical with his wife in front of the entire plane. The off-duty cop then threatened to put Roger in handcuffs if he didn't stop smacking his wife. Roger probably thought that would be the end of it, but he was wrong and was arrested as soon as the plane landed. When he was questioned about his behavior on the plane, Roger said that it wasn't such a big deal. After all, he had only lightly tapped his wife on the head to call her attention to something. But Roger's wife had a different and much more interesting story to tell. Apparently, this wasn't Roger's first time getting physical, and the year before, he had broken her finger during a confrontation. However, Roger wasn't going to let that go without telling some tales of his own. He said that his wife was disrespectful, had anger issues, and had once squeezed his genitals. If Roger is convicted, he may spend up to a year behind bars. You wouldn't expect this sort of behavior from an old pastor at any time, let alone this type of behavior in front of a bunch of people. Maybe it was some old-timey thinking. We're glad we don't live in a time where men treating women like this is acceptable. Number 5. The cop with a past. A fugitive from the Greater Cincinnati area of Ohio was found working as a police officer in his hometown of Mexico after being on the run for 20 years. Antonio Riano, also known as El Diablo, or the Devil, fled the U.S. after he ended a man's life at a bar back in 2004. Antonio Riano was working as a helper at the Roundhouse Bar when Benjamin Becerra, who had been previously involved in a brawl there, returned despite being banned from the place. So of course, he was quickly recognized by the bartender, and Becerra was told to leave, which he refused to do. So Riano then came to the bartender's aid and began arguing with Becerra. The argument started to get heated, so the bartender told both of them to take it outside, and they did. Minutes later, people heard the unmistakable sound of firearms going off and came outside to find Becerra deceased and Riano nowhere to be found. Over the next few days, police officers would find the weapon Riano used, complete with the rounds, still inside. But they could never find El Diablo himself. He vanished like a puff of smoke. Antonio Riano was eventually found working as a police officer in his hometown in Mexico nearly 20 years after fleeing the United States. His location was determined through extensive efforts by Paul Newton, the prosecutor's chief investigator, who spent countless hours scouring the internet for any clue, photo, or piece of evidence that might lead to Riano. Newton's persistence paid off when he eventually located Riano, leading to his arrest and extradition back to the United States. It's a bit weird that they found this guy working as a cop in Mexico, right? Maybe he was trying to right his wrong or something, which he was obviously never going to do. The takeaway here is that you can never really escape your past, no matter how hard you try. Number 4. Stolen money. Lyft driver James Elmore was tricked into delivering stolen money for scammers after he completed a very strange drop-off. Elmore got a request to pick up a package at a house in Miami-Dade, and when he got there, he met an elderly couple who invited him inside their home to speak with a man on the phone. The man then gave specific instructions on where he should take the package to, who to give it to, and what the person would say. Elmore thought the situation was pretty weird, but he didn't put too much thought into it beyond that. He just took the package and did as he had been told. When he got to the drop-off point, he met a man there and asked what the name on the package was. The man provided the correct name, so James released the package and left. What he didn't know was that he had just released nearly $20,000 in stolen money to a ring run by a guy named Agustin Garcia Marsan. Apparently, Garcia Marsan had called the elderly couple who sent the money and told them that their grandson was in some legal trouble and that they needed to raise around $18,500 for his bail bondsman that very day. The elderly couple, driven by care for their grandson, quickly arranged the money and handed it over to Elmore, the Lyft driver that Garcia Marsan had already booked. Later that day, when the elderly couple called their grandson, they realized that they had been scammed and he was in no trouble at all. Thankfully, investigators quickly tracked the payment back to Augustine, and he has since been arrested. As we like to do on this channel, please remember to take a moment to reach out to your elderly loved ones. Scams like this are becoming more common, and the elderly are a popular target. So please warn them about these types of scams so they're not added to the growing list of victims. Number 3. The tiny defense. Conchabar Morel had no idea what he bargained for when he walked into a store and attempted to rob the store owner. What he ended up losing was what little dignity he may have had. Morel walked into the store and placed his weapon on the counter, demanding everything the owner had. The owner of the store happened to have his 8-year-old daughter behind the counter, so he was careful and cooperated with Morel. No reason to risk anyone's life, right? But then Morel pressed his luck by trying to go behind the counter, and that's when things went completely sideways. Once Morel was completely behind the counter, the store owner charged at him, pushing Morel to the ground. As they wrestled, the owner's daughter picked up a baseball bat and started to hit the thief. The owner didn't even notice his daughter's heroics at the time, as he was in his own struggle disarming the robber. It was only when he watched the security footage again that he realized what his daughter had done, and he could do nothing but cry at her love for him. Morel has since been arrested and will soon face the music in court. It's probably not going to do much for his reputation in prison that he was taken down by an 8-year-old girl. Number 2. Media bias. John Cowell Lee got himself sentenced to life in prison without parole for going after Nia Wilson as she stepped off a train in Oakland, California. Cowell didn't just go for Wilson either. He went after her and her sisters as they stepped off from the train. Wilson was stabbed twice, which led to her passing, but her sisters survived with serious injuries. The crazy thing is that Cowell never even gave a motive. In fact, he wasn't even present for most of the court proceedings because of his outbursts. The prosecution pursued a life in prison without parole, the harshest harshest punishment you can get in California, short of the ultimate punishment, something he eventually got. A weird thing about this case was the attitude of the press towards the victim. When local station KTVU Fox 2 reported the news, they showed a picture that had Nia holding what looked like a weapon and posing with it, which is obviously pretty tasteless. This picture outraged viewers because it criminalized the victim of this horrific crime and showed the media to just be desperate for clicks and attention. The weapon that Nia had supposedly posed with wasn't even an actual weapon. It was just a cell phone case. Why the media would choose to use that as a photo isn't clear to us, other than to just make the case a little more sensational. KTVU eventually apologized on Facebook, which is whatever, we guess. They got their clicks. Remember when the media just reported news without any bias? Yeah, we don't either. If you're enjoying this video, be sure to stay tuned right here to find out just how much these guys wanted to leave their country. Number 1. Bad Omens. Gina Rita Russell and her family extorted over $4 million from a victim who believed that Russell truly had psychic powers. When Russell met her unnamed victim back in 2009, she told her that bad things would happen to her and her family, but she could avoid any bad things if she just gave a bunch of valuables to Russell. Funny how that works. But for some reason, this lie caught on, and the victim, who was in college at the time, so she began sending Russell money. But Russell apparently wasn't satisfied with just getting some money. So Russell then told the victim to beat herself to drive demons out, and then told her to lie to her father to get more money. So the victim did just that and lied to her father about endless therapy sessions, university classes, and sleep studies. All of the money for these ventures went straight into Russell's pockets. Russell even had one of her own family members impersonate a therapist in a call to the victim's father to really cement the lies. When Dad's funding eventually ran dry, Russell had another plan. She told the victim to start advertising sensual messaging services for men who needed it. We're being delicate about this here, but what you're thinking was exactly what she was doing, and the income from that was also going to Russell. Things got even stranger when the victim met a chief financial officer in DC through her messaging service. Russell caught on to this and made the victim begin an affair with the man who was married. Russell then told the victim to get money from the man under the guise that she was being threatened by mobsters who would harm her since she owed them a lot of money. Before long, even the man got involved in the scam, as Russell's relatives then called him up pretending to be mobsters and threatening to ruin his life if he didn't pay up. We say pretending here, but it doesn't sound like they were too far off from the actual mafia. Thankfully, this scam couldn't go on forever. The CFO had already embezzled over $4 million to pay Russell and her goons, and his company soon came looking for that money. They involved law enforcement officials, and Russell soon found herself in police custody. Once she was arrested, police discovered that Russell was also running the same psychic scam with another victim at the same time. The good news is that Russell is now off the streets and was sentenced to more than 10 years in prison. It's weird that psychics are allowed to run businesses in the US, isn't it? They're blatantly scamming people, but it's somehow still allowed. At what point is a psychic not a scammer? Tell us in the comments below. What are some of the most ridiculous ones that actually worked? Let's get started with number 7. Love is blind. Then 72-year-old Angela Nwachukwu got married to 27-year-old CJ Nwachukwu just 3 months after meeting him. But the age difference and short courting period aren't the only red flags in this story of love. You see, Angela lived in Britain and CJ lived in Nigeria. The couple were thousands of miles apart, and Angela had to marry him on the first day they met back in Nigeria. How romantic. The only problem with their rosy marriage now was that the UK Home Office had refused to give CJ a visa to come to the UK. The argument was that he didn't prove that he had enough financial backing. This was despite the fact that Angela had spent over £20,000 on getting him the visa. This may look like a fraudulent relationship to you, and Donald Neaty, Angela's ex-husband, agrees. He says that Angela has always been the gullible type, and that it was clear that CJ just wanted to take advantage of her to leave Nigeria. No. He says he hasn't spoken to Angela in over 18 years, and only got wind of her marital adventures with CJ in the papers. With CJ having been refused a visa, what was the next step for the two lovebirds? Well, Angela had decided to work towards securing a student visa for her husband. but it was a hard process for them. Applicants at that time were required to prove that they at least have an annual income of £18,600 between them. They also had to have cash savings of around £16,000. And there are charges of £1,464 for each applicant. Angela insists that the relationship isn't a scam since she admitted that she really didn't have much money and she was upfront about that with CJ from the beginning. We aren't quite sure of what's exactly happened with CJ and Angela since there's no news about them since 2017. Who knows? Maybe they are actually living happily ever after? We'd definitely be a little bit embarrassed that we ever doubted them. Number 6. The Russian astronaut. An unnamed man scammed a little old Japanese lady by claiming that he was an astronaut who needed money to return to Earth. In a twist that may astound even the most accomplished comedy writers, this ruse worked and the woman ended up sending our astronaut roughly $30,000. The entire story started with Instagram. This astronaut kept posting pictures of random things in space and said that he worked at the International Space Station. Okay, it's a bit left field, but it's not too ridiculous. His victim met him on the app and explained that he could only communicate on it because the astronauts at the space station had limited access to mobile service. He then got her to message him online, a Japanese messaging app. Online, he professed his love and she quickly reciprocated. He told her that he wanted to settle down in Japan and have a long and happy life with her. There was a problem though. He couldn't do that if he didn't leave the station, and to leave the space station, he needed money. You see, astronauts have to actually pay for the cost of their rocket back and also need to pay landing fees to the country they arrive in, and all of that was out of pocket. However, there was some good news. All of this was actually affordable and just cost thousands of dollars, not millions. Our astronaut's victim loved him so much that she decided to send him the money. Over 5 installments, she sent him 4.4 million Japanese yen, which was worth around $30,000 at the time. But even that wasn't enough. The astronaut kept asking for more money because, as you know, rockets are expensive. But this time, the victim had seen enough. She reported him to the police and was informed that she'd fallen victim to a love scam. Number 5. Trust me, I'm a celebrity. Brenton Robert Jarrett made a criminal career out of pretending to be a celebrity. Jarrett used his fake star power to defraud victims and even get some of them to get romantically involved. On one occasion, he said that he was Josh Hitchcock, the grandson of legendary director Alfred Hitchcock. But Alfred Hitchcock doesn't have a grandchild named Josh. He also claimed that he was Johnny Depp's brother and once claimed that he was Skeet Ulrich. While impersonating several celebrities, Robert made sure to take as many liberties as he could. He slept with women who believed he was a real celeb and took freebies from hotels and restaurants while impersonating other people. Jarrett left a trail of victims in his wake, and when he was eventually arrested, there was a lot of evidence to jail him. In court, he claimed that he had only committed his crimes because he was bipolar and was truly sad that his victims had suffered. We bet Skeet Ulrich also probably tried to pretend he was Johnny Depp's brother too. Number 4. The Official Secrets Act. Daryl Flynn defrauded multiple seniors of thousands of dollars by convincing them that she was an undercover police officer. In one of her scams, she convinced Diane Baston to part with her money in the belief she was assisting an important police investigation. So she drove Baston around town and had her take out loans and buy a bunch of electronics. Flynn had such a hold over Baston that she refused to even speak to the actual police for fear of breaching the Official Secrets Act, a policy made up by Flynn as part of her story. It apparently took police quite some time to convince her that they were the genuine article. Flynn's scam was simple. She convinced these seniors that they would be helping in an important police investigation that was investigating banks and managed to pilfer more than £20,000. Flynn used fake IDs to convince the seniors that they were doing the police a great service and continued scamming them to her heart's content. Her current scheme was just another in a long line of frauds where she used respectable positions to take advantage of the elderly. Thankfully, Flynn was soon arrested and made to face the music. She was eventually sentenced to 8 years in the slammer after feigning remorse for the first time ever. Looking at her picture, how could anyone believe her though? She looks like a scary person that lives in the trash can in a park on the bad side of town. Number 3. The $72 million lie. 18-year-old Muhammad Islam told a New York Magazine journalist that he had made $72 million trading stock. It was an incredible story with one glaring issue. It was a complete lie. In fact, Muhammad hadn't made a single dollar trading stock. But the magazine, who didn't bother to fact-check a teenager claiming to be incredibly wealthy, didn't know this and published an interview with him anyway. The headline said that Muhammad had made $72 million trading stocks during lunch break at school. The story was met with disbelief by everyone, because everyone isn't brain dead. The disbelief was so palpable that the entire case unraveled within just a few days. For long, Muhammad himself was on CNBC, revealing that his entire claim to fame was fake. He confessed that he had never made a dime from trading and had merely lied about his earnings from trading and investment. But that wasn't what he had told the New York Magazine reporter who spoke to him. He'd played into the whole teenage millionaire trope and had spoken of making $1 million through trading. He even said that some investor was willing to give him $150 million to start a hedge fund. In the defense of the magazine, he'd shown the reporter bank statements showing that he was worth at least 8 figures. These were all pieces of evidence that the magazine needed to base its story on. When the story broke that Muhammad had just been telling an elaborate story, several news organizations picked up on it. So, Muhammad decided to hire a PR firm to manage his reputation. The firm argued that Muhammad wasn't a fraudster and had merely stretched a story and everything had gotten away from him. Since Muhammad didn't really gain a penny from the entire scheme, that may be true. But the fact that Muhammad created evidence to show that he was a millionaire makes us think that he might be a little more guilty of stretching the story than we first thought. So how did this all start if Muhammad had never traded stocks a day in his life? Where did the rumors that he was a millionaire stock trader start? Well, it happens that our man was making simulated trades at a high school investment club. Muhammad's simulated trades were so successful that he made more than $72 million off of them virtually. His numbers were even more impressive than the S&P. But instead of being truthful, he told the New York Magazine journalist that he had made the trades in reality. But people weren't gullible enough to believe his story, and just a little public pressure unraveled his entire tale. And you can almost get how this got away from him, right? You can see how he was like, "Oh, totally radical, dude," or whatever kids say today. "Oh, that's Gucci," or something, when he found out a big magazine thought his trades were real. Then he did the thing we all wish we had the guts to do and said, "I wonder how far I can take it." We would have chickened out. Instead, he's like, "Yeah, bro, I made like 72 million or something, bro. Dope." And then the reporter just eats it up without even questioning it. We're not condoning it, so definitely don't take advantage of some gullible major magazine with some insane story that we'd end up covering because it's so crazy. And don't shout us out while you're doing it just so we do a deep dive on you. Totally don't do that. Number 2, the village idiot. Yeah. Arthur Stimson believed that he had won the lottery, but he ended up being catastrophically wrong. The entire episode started when Stimson received an interesting email back in 2007. The email was titled, "Attention, Notification of Award." The body of the mail told Stimson that he had won a massive cash prize in the Spanish lottery. The mail listed a number for him to call to claim his prize. When Stimson called, he was told that he had won £2.7 million. He was overjoyed at the prospect of this prize, and the scammers on the other end of the phone were overjoyed at the prospect of defrauding him. Stimson didn't know it yet, but calling that number would be the first in a series of awful decisions that would lead him to lose his home and his family and land in prison. The voice on the other end of the phone told Stimson that while he may have won the lottery, he wasn't going to get his money easily. Apparently, there were things like administration charges and transfer fees regarding taxes that he needed to pay. And Stimson had to pay all these fees to get access to his winnings. Why he didn't think they couldn't just deduct the money from the winnings, we'll never know. He probably realized it when he went to his cell way after the fact. Like he's just about to eat lunch and just freezes and says, "Wait a minute." Anyway, at this point, most people would have thought that, but not Stimson. He wanted to be a millionaire instead of a critical thinker. Before we continue, it's important to understand that Stimson isn't just a random guy. He's a pretty accomplished chartered surveyor, so he's not poor. He didn't need the money as he was relatively wealthy and had the respect of his community. But come on, who seriously wouldn't want an extra £2.7 million? Anyway, Stimson believed the voice and started paying phantom fees for a bounty that had never existed. Total, he paid out $50,000 in fake fees and had nothing to show for it. But the game was only just beginning. Over the next year or so, Stimson would send over $1 million in payments to the scammers. One time, he even put 75,000 pounds in a plastic bag and handed it over to supposed men from the lottery board. The scammers didn't let Stimson rest after taking that first 50,000 pounds. They kept asking for more money in fees and charges. And Stimson didn't see the problem problem with this. Or if he did, he made sure not to mention it anywhere. In due course, Stimpson's money ran out and he was forced to start borrowing from neighbors to continue paying. He borrowed £100,000 there, £10,000 here, £50 there, and on until he had borrowed over £1 million to pay the scammers. The most ludicrous thing about this case in particular is that just a few minutes of research on Google would have told Stimpson that the lottery wasn't genuine. We mean, besides all of the other shady stuff they had him doing, not making it obvious. Seriously, how did him handing off a bag full of money to some guy like he's buying a ton of contraband not tip him off that something was weird? The bank that the con men used to give the entire scheme legitimacy didn't even exist. A simple Google search would have told Stimpson that the so-called Casablanca bank had no digital footprint. Additionally, there was an email claiming that part of the windfall had been deposited at the Madrid branch of the Banca Unicaja Bank. While this bank is real, a Google search would have proven that it was mostly used in fraudulent schemes like this one. Through all this, our man Stimpson was determined to get this windfall and paid through his nose for a fake cash prize. Stimpson was so convinced of this that he told people that he would pay them £10,000 for every £1,000 he borrowed. He was so certain that the lottery payment would come through any time. You may wonder why he didn't just stop, but it's possible that he believed that he had reached the point of no return. He had simply paid and sacrificed too much to just stop now. He hoped to gamble and pray that the money eventually came through. While it's possible that Stimpson did pocket some of the money he was borrowing and use them to pay other debtors, the police believe he gave everything to the scammer. Eventually, Stimpson became bankrupt and had to forfeit his house to debt collector. He was arrested and fraud and forgery charges were brought against him. He pled guilty to all of them and was sentenced to 4 years in prison. The scammers were never caught, and since the case has now been closed, it's unlikely that they'll ever face any judgment for defrauding Stimpson. Number 1. Internet trolls. Jessica Adelman tried to warn other people about a scam she fell victim to, but was bullied by internet trolls instead. Because the internet only cares about cats. See? That made you happy, didn't it? Jessica had been searching for a flexible online job that would allow her to work from home. But instead of getting a great remote job, she was duped of over £15,000. The website she saw claimed that people could make money through it by leaving reviews for a large company. But the site also encourages users who signed up to pay money for upgrades. These upgrades came with higher percentages of commission. That was the primary vehicle the site used to scam her. According to Jessica, the site never asked her for payment information, but when she started working, she got a prompt that if she paid £70, she would make £220. She was skeptical about the whole thing, but paid the money. Shockingly, she received £220 in return. Unfortunately, the real scam started when Jessica was put under pressure to review package orders, which she had to pay for. Outside that, the website allowed her to pay for an upgrade that would allow her to receive 5 times the commission that she earned. But that upgrade cost £7,500. So Jessica paid for it, and halfway through her workday, she received another package order that required her to pay £7,500. Before long, she was given another order that required her to pay £28,000. That's when she noticed that something was off and she had been scammed. But the story somehow got even worse. When Jessica brought the story to TikTok and told the world about it, she received hundreds of bullying comments. The bullies told her that she was gullible for falling for the scam, and many had no empathy for her. Thankfully, it wasn't all bad. Some people made helpful comments and told her how they had fallen for the same scam. It just goes to show how widespread this sort of scam is. Click to watch one of these next videos. Let us know in the comments section who you think is more annoying. Vegans who talk about being vegan or PETA activists.